Hello sunflowers, today I want to share a global reading that left me deeply reflective. As I looked into the symbols, one thing became very clear. The world is entering a period where appearances will become increasingly difficult to trust. What looks stable may not be stable. What looks secure may not be secure. And what looks impossible today may suddenly become tomorrow's headline. The first image that appears is connected to money. Not personal money. Institutional money, banks, financial systems, investment groups, large organizations that millions of people trust without even thinking about it. I keep seeing the image of a financial institution strongly associated with families, protection, and everyday people. At first, everything appears normal. Then questions begin to surface, documents, investigations, internal conflicts. The kind of story that starts quietly and then suddenly dominates newspapers, television programs, and social media. I would pay attention to institutions whose names carry feminine symbolism, protection symbolism, or family symbolism. I do not see an immediate collapse. I see something worse, a loss of trust. And once trust begins to disappear, fear spreads much faster than facts. At the same time, another situation develops. Health. I keep seeing discussions involving contagious diseases, emergency measures, and authorities trying to prevent a larger problem. This energy pulls me toward regions that already struggle with healthcare infrastructure. Parts of Africa appear repeatedly. I also see concerns involving international travel routes, airports, ports, large population centers. What worries me is not necessarily the disease itself. It is the reaction, restrictions, emergency announcements, arguments between experts, governments under pressure, citizens divided over what should or should not be done. Now here is where the reading becomes much heavier. The energy suddenly shifts toward international conflicts. I see a region surrounded by old rivalries, ancient wounds, religious tensions, political disputes that never fully disappeared. There are meetings behind closed doors, military movements, public speeches that sound stronger than usual, and there is a phrase that keeps echoing through this reading. The situation is escalating, not one event, a sequence of events, one incident leading to another, one reaction triggering another response, until the entire world begins paying attention. I am especially drawn toward regions connected to the Middle East. Not because a single dramatic event appears, but because pressure continues building beneath the surface, and pressure eventually looks for a release. What surprised me most is that while world leaders argue, another figure begins emerging, a younger figure, someone not traditionally viewed as a major player, someone who communicates differently, someone who understands technology, social networks, and modern influence far better than many established leaders. This individual does not appear to gain attention through traditional political structures. People are drawn to them naturally. I keep seeing the letters A, M, J, and R appearing symbolically around this energy. Whether those letters relate to a name, a movement, or something else remains unclear, but I would pay attention, because the reading suggests that this person grows quietly at first, then suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. There is also another symbol that repeats itself, the earth, the ground beneath our feet. I see discoveries, resources, minerals, ancient structures, scientific findings hidden below the surface, something buried, something overlooked, something that powerful interests suddenly become obsessed with. Governments become interested, corporations become interested, investors become interested, because whatever is discovered has value, enormous value, not only financially, strategically. And before this reading ends, another concern appears. Education, teachers, students, universities. I see financial pressure, budget reductions, institutions struggling to maintain normal operations. I see educators feeling exhausted, unsupported, frustrated, and I feel that this issue grows far larger than most people currently expect. The message I receive is simple. Many people are still looking at isolated events, but the symbols show connections, finance, health, education, resources, leadership, conflict, all moving at the same time, all influencing one another. And that is why this reading feels less like a collection of separate predictions and more like the beginning of a global shift that is already underway. One thing keeps bothering me. The more I look at the direction the world is moving, the more I feel that many people are paying attention to the wrong stories. The headlines are loud, the political arguments are loud, the scandals are loud. But beneath all of that, something else is happening. And I don't think enough people are talking about it. What concerns me most is how quickly societies are becoming divided, not only politically, emotionally, socially, culturally. People are losing the ability to disagree without seeing each other as enemies. And history has shown us many times that when division reaches a certain level, somebody always appears promising simple answers to complicated problems. That is why I keep coming back to the same image. A younger leader, someone most people are probably underestimating today. Not because they currently hold enormous power, because they don't, not yet. But because they understand something older, leaders struggle to understand. Attention, influence, communication. This is someone who knows how to speak directly to millions of people. Someone who doesn't need traditional institutions to build support. Someone who grows stronger every time critics try to silence them. At first, they will be treated like a curiosity, then a nuisance, then a threat. And eventually people will realize they should have been paying attention much earlier. I would not be surprised if this individual comes from outside the traditional political elite. Someone younger, someone viewed as unconventional, someone capable of attracting both passionate support and intense criticism at the same time. And while this new generation of leadership begins emerging, another problem continues growing in the background. Religious tensions, ideological tensions, cultural tensions. I am not talking about spirituality. I am talking about people using belief systems to justify conflict, using identity to divide, using differences to create fear. When I look towards certain regions, especially areas that have lived with tension for decades, I see the atmosphere becoming increasingly fragile. The kind of fragility where one incident can trigger a chain reaction, one statement, one attack, one retaliation, and suddenly the situation becomes much larger than anyone expected. Many people believe these conflicts are isolated. I don't. I think they are becoming connected, not necessarily through geography, but through consequences. Because in today's world, a crisis in one region can affect energy prices, markets, migration, and security discussions across the entire planet. There's another issue I cannot ignore: major international events, large gatherings, sporting competitions, global celebrations, places where thousands of people come together. What should be moments of unity increasingly become stages for political messaging, ideological disputes, and demonstrations. I believe we will continue seeing this happen, more frequently, more openly, and sometimes more aggressively. There is also something else that keeps appearing in my thoughts: a story involving a child, not a political leader, not a celebrity, a child. And somehow this story becomes symbolic of a much larger issue. The kind of story that spreads across every platform. The kind of image that people never forget. The kind of moment that changes public opinion almost overnight. I cannot explain why this particular energy feels so significant, but it does. And then my attention moves toward Europe. Not because Europe becomes the center of everything, but because Europe finds itself dealing with the consequences of many different pressures at once. Economic pressure, migration pressure, political pressure, social pressure. Issues that have existed for years, becoming harder and harder to manage. At the same time, I keep feeling that parts of Africa will receive international attention for reasons that are unfortunately connected to crisis rather than progress. And that frustrates me. Because some of the most important stories in the world receive attention only after something terrible happens. The truth is that many of the changes shaping the future are already underway. Most people simply don't recognize them yet. They are looking for dramatic moments, historic announcements, massive events. But history often moves quietly before it moves loudly. And right now, I believe we are living through one of those quiet moments. The kind people only understand after everything has already changed. There is one area where I believe the world is about to experience developments that very few people are prepared for: science, technology, discovery. Most people associate global change with politics, wars, or financial markets. But some of the biggest shifts in human history happened because somebody discovered something, a new resource, a new technology, a new way of understanding the world. And that is exactly where my attention keeps returning. I have a strong feeling that the next few years will bring discoveries that force people to rethink assumptions they have held for decades. Not necessarily because those assumptions were wrong, but because they were incomplete. What interests me is that these discoveries do not seem limited to one field. I see movement in medicine, research, energy, natural resources, even archaeology. There is something hidden beneath the surface, and I mean that literally. Whether it is a valuable mineral deposit, a major scientific discovery underground, an archaeological site, or a resource that suddenly becomes strategically important, I believe governments and corporations will pay enormous attention to it. The reason is simple: control. The future often belongs to those who control what others need. And I see increasing competition over resources that many people rarely think about today. Water, rare minerals, strategic materials, energy infrastructure. The average person may not notice these battles immediately, but investors will, governments will, military planners will, and eventually everyone else will too. At the same time, there is another side to this story, something far more positive: medical research. I believe we are entering a period where breakthroughs become more common: new treatments, improved therapies, advances that help people live longer and healthier lives. Many people spend so much time focusing on everything that is going wrong that they overlook how much progress is happening behind the scenes. Scientists around the world are working on problems that previous generations believed were impossible to solve, and some of those efforts are beginning to produce results. But while science advances, another institution appears to be moving in the opposite direction: education. This is one of the most concerning areas I keep thinking about, not because education disappears, because pressure increases. Funding becomes more difficult. Teachers face greater challenges. Students face growing uncertainty. And institutions that once seemed permanent suddenly discover they are far more vulnerable than they imagined. I also worry about the environment, not because I expect one single catastrophic event, because I see a pattern: volcanic activity, extreme weather, geological instability. Events that remind humanity that despite all our technology, we still live on a planet we do not fully control. Nature does not negotiate, nature does not compromise, nature simply follows its own rules. And I believe there will be moments over the coming years when people are reminded of that reality. There is something else that keeps returning to my thoughts: economic pressure, not necessarily a collapse, not necessarily a disaster, a slow accumulation of strain, the kind that builds quietly, businesses closing, industries changing, entire professions being transformed by technology. Many people will find themselves adapting faster than they ever expected. Those who adapt may discover opportunities. Those who resist may find the transition much harder. And perhaps that is the message I keep returning to: adaptation. The world is changing, whether people want it to or not. Some changes will be exciting, some will be frightening, some will be misunderstood. But change itself seems unavoidable. When I step back and look at everything together, I do not see a future defined by one event. I see a future defined by acceleration. More information, more disruption, more innovation, more conflict, more transformation, everything moving faster. And the people who thrive in that environment will not necessarily be the strongest or the wealthiest or the most powerful. They will be the people who learn how to adapt without losing themselves, because that may become one of the most valuable skills of all. Not predicting the future, not controlling the future, learning how to move with it. Before I finish, there is one final thought I want to leave with you, because after everything we've discussed, the financial pressures, the geopolitical tensions, the emerging leaders, the scientific discoveries, and the social changes, one question remains: what kind of world are we actually moving toward? Many people believe the future will be shaped only by governments. Others believe it will be shaped only by technology. I disagree. I believe the next chapter of history will be shaped by a collision between both. Technology is becoming more powerful every year. Artificial intelligence, digital currencies, mass surveillance systems, data collection, predictive algorithms, these are no longer concepts from science fiction. They are becoming part of daily life. And while these tools can create incredible opportunities, they also create new forms of power, power that previous generations never had to confront. What concerns me is that most people still underestimate how quickly these changes are happening. Entire industries are being transformed, entire professions are being redefined, and many decisions affecting the future are being made behind closed doors long before the public becomes aware of them. At the same time, I see something equally powerful happening. People are beginning to question old systems, old narratives, old institutions, not because they necessarily reject them, but because they want answers, they want transparency, they want accountability, and that desire is not going away. This is why I believe we will continue seeing the rise of unconventional leaders, independent voices, and movements that would have struggled to gain attention 20 years ago. The world is becoming less predictable, but it is also becoming more connected. A single event in one country can influence millions of lives on the other side of the planet. A discovery made by one scientist can change entire industries. A decision made by one government can trigger reactions across continents. And that is why I keep returning to the same conclusion. The greatest challenge of the coming years may not be conflict. It may not be economics. It may not even be technology. The greatest challenge may be discernment. Knowing what is real, knowing what is manipulation, knowing when to act, knowing when to wait, because information has never moved faster than it moves today. And yet clarity often feels harder to find than ever before. If there is one message I would leave you with, it is this. Do not become so focused on fear that you miss opportunity. Do not become so focused on chaos that you miss progress. And do not become so distracted by headlines that you fail to notice the deeper changes taking place beneath them. History is always moving. The question is whether we are paying attention while it happens. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for your energy, your trust, and your presence. May peace, wisdom, and protection guide you and your family. And now I want to hear from you. Which of these global forecasts caught your attention the most? Was it the rise of new leadership, the economic shifts, the scientific breakthroughs, or the geopolitical tensions unfolding around the world? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I will be reading them. And as always, may the light walk beside you wherever your path leads next.